would like to start with our relationships, and that goes back 10 years or 8 years or whatever. And when you are working in Brussels,
Yes,
and
that's true.
so we have been both specialists on electromobility, and you had the data.
Yeah.
And I thought data is an important thing of the future, and so we exchanged a lot of things. We were talking about European charging networks, so we had thousands in Italy, 1,500 in France. So we thought the Dutch would be in the game. That when we met, and I'm so happy to see that you stay in that game as I am. And that goes back to the foundation of CharIN. So we celebrated our 10 years anniversary this year. And the purpose of CharIN was to build a cross-industry alliance in the early days of charging technology. And for those who are new in the game, so that was totally confusion in the market. We had an Italian connector, we had a French connector, we had a German connector, we had Japanese, 2 variants in China, and we had the Americans. And so the assumption was, if we as an industry can't align on that, that is a disaster for scalability, business development, trust, believability on that. And CharIN managed to start with a cross-industry approach. So we, honestly speaking, we collected some believers from industry, from car industry, from software industry, from technology, semiconductor, and all those parties you need to create an ecosystem of charging. And in those times, so that was of a great value to give trust to the industry participants to say, okay, if we could scale up, and happily, so we are already in that phase of scaling up, so we can be successful. And it's good to have an answer for the regulators to say, okay, we as an industry know what to do. Please help us with regulatory support, and we care for industry. And that was a bit of a background, 10 years history, and important to mention to start an association 10 years ago, that was a bit different than today. As we have seen eViolin, so that is already based on an existing framework and society and industry. In those times, it was somehow new, and we are still alive, having around 300 members.
I was about to say, right now it's a bit more than 300.
Yeah,
but when was the biggest jump in terms of new members coming in? When did you see that?
Yeah, that was after 3 years, so that you always have this consolidation phase, and from first ideas and vision, you need administration and stuff. And I would say for an association to be stable and successful, you need 2 years for admin services, and the others are observing you. So what are those guys doing? And how to survive is by creating results. So you only get attraction of members and participants if you create value.
Yeah.
And that still happens to have that base layer of project managers, as we have seen here in the first row with Semi and Alex. And that is, later on it's easy because you have trust, and if you are jumping over the burden, so that helps you immediately. And interesting point is, so we have a very starving industry now, being honest. So we have the influence from the American market, as we are working global, so that has influence on our activities and membership base. And to have that stable base is quite important to gain further trust to our members and create value.
Yeah. No, I mean, that says a lot, the growth in terms of members and the type of ecosystem players that you have. You have literally everyone in the mix, including OEMs, and sometimes OEMs, you work for one as well. That also we're thinking about Europe, but also you work globally. So you do have European OEMs, but you also have American OEMs. Where do you see, the vehicle manufacturers in particular being ambitious when it comes to standardization? What are the aspects where, especially European manufacturers have been very successful?
Yeah, that is based on the fundamental understanding of the car industry. And it's a mess for a car manufacturer to make variants for different countries. And so we managed to have left-hand and right wheel-hand driving. So that is manageable, but it costs money, and it causes administration, variant building, So you have a lot of limitations,
Yep.
and that was the motivation starting with CharIN. So to get rid of the mess of a French connector, an Italian one in Europe, and I would not say we succeeded completely. So as we still have China as a big building block, but for the rest of the world, so we almost achieve our target to reduce the parameter set of manufacturing. And that is the motivation to participate and to believe in that common goal. And what helps us all is to have the scaling factors. So meanwhile, we have millions of each product, and that gives every party opportunity to scale up and to make better products. And finally, that comes to the end customer, because competition and volume always helps to reduce cost and improve quality. And potentially we are coming later to quality. Because I say, okay, this connector shape battle, that is wasted energy, we are done. And so let's face the real issues and challenges of the growing industry.
I mean, that's where it starts, right? Because we're talking about, first of all, still maturing industry. That is the EV charging space in particular. But now more and more it interacts with others. And I can give an example with payments, because CharIN is doing some work together with EMVCo on payments. And it's certainly an important development, because more and more drivers expect things to be like that. As we have now, the mass market coming in, they expect things to work seamlessly. So can you share a bit more about the approach of CharIN when it comes to working with others like EMVCo that I mentioned?
Yeah, that is what I meant. So we left the discussion about connector shape, that is mechanics, and now we are coming I would say that it's all customer focused. And if the customer loves electromobility, so we can sell products, it's an easy game, and we are all successful at the end. And the opportunity of CharIN, that is an open association where there's no dominance of any industry, and that clears your mind. It's okay if that is our mission and target to serve the customer. The customer is used to have credit card payments. So what is the translation of that process into charging an electric vehicle? And as we do not have an enemy or a position, so we invite new industries into CharIN. So let's have a look. If it works, it's good. If not, so we go our own ways. And so that means we are expanding our knowledge portfolio year by year. So we get new inputs by payment. So we have this big group of V2G activities, which is going to show up during the International Automobile Show in Munich. So that is one of the big things. And what we know is if we can align together, we make business out of that. If we can't do that, nobody is winning anything out of that. And that is still this experimental procedure of a startup. Let's come together and not say, okay, the credit card industry is buying the complete business. It's always a bit of negotiation because everybody says, okay, I'm the strong one. We can learn a lot from politics. But
it doesn't happen only with strength, because as you mentioned, the payment industry, and they're used to certain flows of how a payment would go, but that might not necessarily be the same way that we here in the EV charging industry plan about it. So certainly discussing with them makes sense, so that we're not facing a broken solution, even though if it's mandated by the payment industry, they tell us what to do, but we don't do it like that. So we need to have that communication is what I mean. And it's...
there is always striving for the best customer solution and give the customer the choice to pay by card in mechanical procedure, to have an RFID, an app, or do it in car. And so as more and more things are app and in-car driven, so we will see credit card payment out of the vehicle as it is already established. And the opposite is to found an association concerning we want to have credit card payment and we are going to conquer the world. That will never happen, or that only works for Apple or Microsoft or some of those guys, and even those parties have difficulties to align the complete industry.
Right.
And our mission is to give the customers a choice and compete on performance, on quality, on industry offer. And credit card is one piece of the game, and that is plug and charge is an alternative. Traditional paying methods are an alternative, so we have elderly people preferring one or the other. And the glue is to bring that back on standards, so that we don't trust on proprietary solutions, that we all can refer on global standards and technology. And so if we look to the North American charging system, so that is meanwhile a part of the combined charging system and megawatt charging system family, that is same safety, same security, interoperability, ISO communication, and everything is open to everybody. And that has been a big success to come from a proprietary Tesla solution.
Now to the J3400.
Yeah. And that is important. That is called NACS, and CS is our CharIN brand for combined charging system, and that is a family of. And that pays off because we have a couple of 100,000 engineer hours behind the system development, and to have the opportunity to reuse all that stuff that dramatically feeds into the customer perception and activity and quality.
Yeah.
And
but
that
also
is
from a business maturity perspective, right? Because you're not building from the ground up. You already step on existing work.
Yeah, that is our hope, as we are more industry supportive and industry driven, instead of being such of one of these complaining associations. So we have a lot of them. They are complaining about government. Europe is on the wrong path, and so they are basically not creating any value behind, and that is a bit...
I tend to differ on that because we are member of several, and we do see value in them. The same way that we see value in the work that being done on standardization. Actually, earlier this year, together with a colleague of mine that I just saw enter, we were in Washington, D.C., and we were part of CharIN's inaugural flying day in the US. We met with people in the Congress, people who were able to really understand the value of standardization. And I was honestly surprised because it's not typical to see policymakers understand that standardization is a good sign of an industry. But it was also through CharIN where we were able to share, and we were joined by other industry leaders like Hubject was there as well, but also ABB, GM and others. So it was a great opportunity, and we did a bit of complaining as well, but we focused on the standardization aspect of it as well.
Yeah, that is one of the big CharIN assets, as we are acting global, and we are working cross-industry, and we respecting the ecosystem of charging, and that is a bit of a broader scope, which makes it challenging, honestly speaking, but that is like a political message. So if we are able to cooperate, to align, to find business partnerships as on those events here, so we are strong. If we are trusting on regulators and governments, they have a bit of a restricted perspective on the world, and they want to make everything great in US, in Europe, and in Asia. And that is if we can make that as an industry, and that goes a bit into this philosophical dimension. So we can make a success, and we can guide the leaders of the world, the political leaders, to follow us, and that demands us to cooperate. If not, and if we are going into separate segments, so we have to serve separate markets with separate products, and that reduce our turnover opportunities and big business cases.
For sure.
And that is what we are delivering currently. My colleagues are in Indonesia, talking to the Indonesian government. We have great activities in South America, because all the governments are looking, so who can help us to make the appropriate regulations.
Yeah, I know in Brazil especially there's been quite a lot of challenges when it comes to topics like double taxation or also fraud. And the experience of working in all those markets is also bringing, what works here in Europe, what works in the US, bring that knowledge to somewhere else where the market can essentially skip be lost and try to learn and take the proven methods if they can fit that market and implement them.
Yeah, and that is what we can offer. We have 10 years of experience, we have 6,000 engineers behind that, and we, as an association, that is not the association, it's the team of members, so we have the knowledge of the world of electromobility in every perspective, and that is an offer to government. So if you need any consulting hints, We are in principle neutral, and that is not typically for every lobby association, and that is currently a big asset. And that is what helps our members like AMPECOs and others. So if we can say, okay, we are part of that understanding, that is always stronger than to say I'm AMPECO, I'm ABB, I'm BMW. So that is a part of a strong team. And so we need to keep that up, even if we have our political issues worldwide, and we see a small tendency to restrict.
Do you see that right now in terms of the trade tensions happening? Do you see companies taking a step back from certain markets, or?
Yeah, we see that they are more willing to contribute to national proudness, and but we are fighting against, and so after 10 years experience, so it's hardly to separate as an individual country. And I'm happy that we did the North America activities a couple of years ago when we started with a roundtable in Chicago. That was almost 2 years ago, when we brought all the managers from the governmental institutions together. It's okay, what happens in that market and how can we support it? And now it's 1.5 years later, 2 years later, we have the formal SAE standard, which helps us to say we have an open market, and that is always not coming from nothing. That is because we are acting as a strong community within CharIN.
I mean, on the global stage, we see what's happening in China, for example, and how they are exporting to markets which are, Southeast Asia, Australia, including Latin America, even in the Middle East as well. There's certain exports there which bring their own standards and their own technology. So what would you say about that, and how CharIN is positioned? Because I know it's politically sensitive.
I wanted to ask you. When we started with CharIN, so we wanted to have a technology which is influenced by industry, fair competition, and with our values. And in those times, we had the Chinese technology and the Japanese one. And both of the technologies have been under full control of Chinese and Japanese governments. That was the Ministry of Energy and Commerce. It's okay, we are deciding about the technology of the world. And so now we are against. So we are the rest of world. We call it ROW. And so if we can align as an industry worldwide, the Chinese and the Japanese governments have no chance to drive their own interests through. And that is still true. But we have to fight further, because the Chinese at least have their strategy to be different to a global standard, because that helps them to bring products and to realize industry strategy. And finally, what we did within CharIN, we created this megawatt charging system that goes back 5 years ago when we aligned industry. So what is the customer perception? What is the requirement set? And what do we need to do to make a standard out of that? And as the Chinese did not play with us, so they did not do nothing on that. But what they did, they copied a part of the MCS design from CharIN. And some of very important governmental representatives asked me, "Oh, Mr. Bracklo, we need to make it different. Are we allowed to copy a part of your connector?" And I told them, so we have an open world. Let's do what you assume to do, but you are not creating value. And honestly, being honest, so that is our obligation, to create value for the end customer, for society, for environment, and for our industry participants. And that is still the same story after 10 years when we go to Africa or to South America, giving a transparency to the governments. So it's easy to follow China or proprietary solutions, but that always has an impact. And say, okay, if you trust on an open technology, you have a stake in the game. If you follow a trend, so you are the slave of that. And that already happens besides charging on resources, on trade agreements, on harbors. So that happens already. But finally, it's a decision of the local governments and the asset we have. So we have an open and transparent information, so what is available, and they have to make their mind by themselves. Interestingly, when we started CharIN, I said, So we don't do politics. We are coming from industry.
How did that go for you?
And industry is powerful enough to drive it from the industry perspective. Honestly speaking, so we spent a portion of our association into political work because the time changes in time, and it's a value to give that political advice, and that is a combination of trust into technology, give governments the impression so we have a strong knowledge base on that what happens. You can trust.
But also, also, sorry to interrupt you, but also governments have to be aware of the value that is created through standardization and the new business models that are unlocked, or vice versa, the business models that are not unlocked if you don't go for standardization. And we see quite a lot now actually happening in the world of energy management.
Yeah.
Something that a lot of folks here that are probably represented at this trade show, they were thinking as a nice to have. Now it's an integral part of the business model, and it's enabled by
standards, by ISO protocols, and that is a quite interesting point in Europe. And so what we did within CharIN, so we aligned all this different perspective of energy, of hardware, of vehicles, of connectors. So we did that job already. And the organization of the European community is still in these boxes. So we have a strong energy focus, that is DG Ener. So we have the transport, that is DG Move. And they still on these perspectives. So that is my small little world. And what we can help them, say, okay, if you want to have an ecosystem answer, go to CharIN. And so they give you the answer. It takes a couple of days or weeks. But we can form an industry working group and give you the answer for what is good for the ecosystem approach. And that all comes together with the V2G, grid codes, frequency regulation, and that is really a challenge for the legislator to understand, because that is traditional lobbying. So I fight for my central power plant. The others say, okay, I have these little tiny batteries, and if you would connect them, and that is...
I have to say we're trending in the right direction, at least.
Yeah, that is all a lot of transportation and transformation of the industry, and so we have the Sustainable Transport Forum. So we have a lot of institutions, meanwhile, on European Union level, where they interact, and that was 5 years back. So they did not interact because they had their
I would argue they still face some challenges in coordinating, because I've seen parallel processes that more or less aim in the same direction but run by different parts of the.
And that is why we must align via CharIN. So because they demand us to implement ISO 15118 8-2-20 in a specific time frame. And so what we do, we figure out, so is it feasible, is it fair to everybody, and more on a content-based answer then. So we don't want to have that, so let's stay in the old world. That is really an interaction, and that is helpful for the legislator to figure out, so what is a serious baseline. And so they meanwhile believe CharIN as a very sophisticated trust-based unit to give that information condensed to one unity. And that is tremendous change. So we have many things. I started with the V2G.
Yeah.
So we will have on the 20th of November the European V2G Leadership Forum. And there's everything coming together. And so we prepared that subject for 2 years, I would say. And their legislator, industry coming together and say, okay, that is market now, and that is where CharIN comes in. So we are not interested to make papers. So we are interested to enable business and market opportunities. And that is important to know and to be part of the CharIN family. So what is the status of technology? How mature is it? How can we have access to American, Indonesian, or European government legislator?
I have to say that's been super valuable. Also, once you establish, I can tell you on behalf of AMPECO, we work in 70 countries right now. That's 70. And we've tapped into the knowledge of some of your local representatives as well to understand better the market realities where we don't necessarily have physical presence with offices and so on. So that's been super helpful. I know we have to wrap it up, but I wanted to ask you one last question. And going back to the way that you gather together that ecosystem and work on standardization in particular as sort of an overarching team. What do you think you're doing right so that this really has the impact and the value that you mentioned?
That is, I would say, a history opportunities because we build trust among each other in competition. And that is one of the core assets to meet together, striving for the best technology and respect the competency of the competitor. And you can't do it by that, let's face it. It's a 10 years development of that. And I remind our festival format where we have the latest camouflaged products 1 year, 1.5 years before market introduction. And we share that among competitors. And I'm in that industry, so that is unbelievable. And why it is possible? Because we trust each other. And if I would ask, or everybody would ask the top management, shall I meet with Toyota, GM, BMW on a specific spot, and we would ask for allowance, they would never allow us to do it, but it's now established to do that way. And that is for me trust and trust in your own competency. So if you are good, you are competitive, and the trust level helps you to improve your product and your product towards the customer. And that is the perfect base because currently we always create new issues. Say, okay, what happens or what can we do to make it better for the end customer? And you immediately find 10 or 20 parties to discuss about that. And just a couple of examples. So we have these cable theft issues. So we are facing an issue, meeting together. We are sharing our experience with the competitor. And say, okay, that is valuable for me. I'm not looking to solve my issue. So say, okay, if I put my knowledge on the table, so I gain more out of that. And
typically there's an antitrust statement at the start of the meeting, so don't get the wrong impression that those companies would be doing improper things. But to your point, this example that you gave with automotive companies using this as the place to collaborate, that's very important. And next festival that you have, I believe, is in Spain, and then you have one in the US, right?
Yeah, and we have a specific one, 7th and 8th of October at the EUREF campus here in Berlin.
Right.
And that is dedicated to the V2G because that is close to market. We see the products. Some are already on stage, and we are facing that interoperability issue, and that is almost one of our big challenges. It's good to have a product, and it's good to have a Tesla wallbox in a Tesla environment with a Tesla vehicle in a Tesla country. And the challenge is to have it in an open environment and give the customers a choice to buy a wallbox, a storage, a vehicle, and to change it every year with a different setup. And so we are facing that, and so that is now the early stages where we already have products to evaluate, and I'm sure we can learn a lot of that. Where are the hidden things? And coming back to standards, the assumption is if the standard is there, it works, but we are gluing something in between, and that is to enrich the standards by market experience and knowledge sharing. And so that is one of the things to meet people, to join conferences like here. So it's a small ICNICS worldwide in a different format and more on this experimental exchange of technology.
No, that's very well put, Claas, and we've gone a long way, but the journey is not finished. I think the user experience that you mentioned too is certainly what a lot of people in this big hangar, because we're not in a small room anymore. I mean, we're at this huge venue, and it's telling for the industry. We want to go in that direction, and we know we have a North Star of where we need to go. And thanks for the work that you and pretty much all CharIN members as well do in that direction. So,
and just one political statement. I'm really pissed about the current political framework we have. And everybody is believing to make themselves strong and getting a benefit out of that. I don't believe it. So that is a risk for society, that is a risk for the country, that is a risk for the government. And we stand up as electromobility society and show them we can cooperate globally, and they are somehow on the wrong path.
The power of technology.
That's it.
Yeah. Nice way to close it. Thanks, Claas. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.